It's really good to be here as part of the DICE network. So yes, I'm David Greenfield. I'm your chair for the next 44 and a half minutes. That's half my 2 minutes gone already. I have far too many roles, but today I'm here as the Circular Economy Institute. So if any of you are wanting to be professionals in the Circular Economy Institute, there's a QR code outside. But I'm also an applied researcher, visiting professor of circular economy at the University of Brighton. And we're currently working on a new European Horizon-funded program looking at how we can actually disassemble end-of-life tech using AI, machine learning and robotics. We've got a little bit of a presentation on one of the tables outside. So do come and have a chat with myself or Poppy, who's our intern. Say hello, Poppy. But today's session is about looking at some of the systematic challenges and changes that we have in circularity. So we're going to have 3 excellent presentations and then a bit of questionnaires. We're going to start with Professor Francis Wall from the University of Exeter. Francis, it's lovely to have you here. Please come and do talk to the audience. You need that.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and good morning, everybody. So I was asked to set this up by going right to the front of the value chain and talking about the challenge of critical minerals. So CMCC is the Critical Minerals Challenge Centre project that we have at the University of Exeter. So I thought I'd put this slide in to start with. I haven't used this for a while, but I think it says something very important. It's really about energy pathways, but it applies to absolutely everything. And if you see just going there from 1700s to the 1800s, the 1900s to the 2000s, the number of different sorts of materials that we're using in tech is going up and up. And I'll come back to that during the talk, as you see. So as our technology goes on, it's becoming progressively more and more clever, more and more complicated, lots of different materials. We're making things in 2000s. This is probably about 10 years old. People started to use this nice sliding talks, I think. And you see there's a catalytic converter using platinum group metals and rare earths. Now we could put an electric car on there and data centers and lots of space tech and additional things. And so this is the thing. All the clever technology that we're using is bringing into play lots of different elements, i.e. lots of different minerals that have to come out of the ground. And one of the big changes, I think a couple of big changes I would point out with that technology is, first of all, one of the big drivers are some of the energy transition technologies like electric vehicles and wind turbines, where the use of some of the minerals like rare earths, for example, has gone from applications that used micrograms or grams, tiny amounts, up to things like cars that use kilograms and wind turbines that use tons of rare earths in them, really driving the use and the amount that we need. And then things like phones on there and data centers that not only have all these elements in them, that seem to have this really fast turnover of technology, with things just staying for a couple of years before they're renewed. So 2 really big trends there, I think. And everything that we use is coming out of the ground if we're not farming it. So there's 2 really fundamental things that we do as human beings. We use the surface of the earth and we grow things and, have animals, we farm, and then we use the earth to make things. Just about everything around us, whether it's our buildings or a technology today, everything started life by being either mined or otherwise extracted from the earth. And maybe we forget about that part even more than we forget about farming and food production in our everyday lives. But that's really super important. Everything starts there in the ground, starts with a rock. But how much we mine is really variable. So did you know that in terms of metals, let's take out the road materials and some of the building blocks, the big sand and aggregate world. But in terms of metals, 93% of what we mine is actually iron ore for steel. And in the rest come all the other elements that were on that diagram, everything we need in the tech. But sometimes you need things like rare earth elements, for example, to make things work, but you only do need them in quite small quantities. So what we mine can really vary from the huge iron ore mines down to hundreds of thousands of tons per year worldwide of rare earths, or even down to just hundreds of tons of some of the very specialist elements. And so therefore it's not a surprise that in some of those specialist commodities, we only need 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 mines in the whole world to satisfy demand. And that means that sometimes the supply is really concentrated. And that led about 15 years ago to this new idea of the latest reincarnation of critical raw materials, now called in the UK critical minerals. And here is the UK's latest list, and all the spots are different elements or different minerals, just remembering they come out of the ground to begin with. And I've got tin on there, lithium and rare earth elements is REEs, just as an example here. And copper, for example, really super important. We know in all the electronics and electrical that didn't get put into the UK critical mineral list, but nowadays 34 other elements, other minerals did get put. So that dashed line is arbitrary. It's up to the experts where they decide to put that line. But for us in the UK, we think there's 34 critical raw materials that are really super important, and that's the economic vulnerability line along the bottom for UK manufacturing, but also at a high global supply risk. That's what makes a critical mineral. But 34 things in there. And if I take our UK list, I'm going to show you now, and I add 2 other very well thought through lists for manufacturing in the USA and Europe, and I put them on the periodic table of the elements, I can pretty much fill it in. Right. So almost everything now has the jazzy name critical in front of mineral, right? We can discuss what doesn't get into that critical list. But if you take off the things that don't exist in nature and so on, you've pretty much got the whole of the periodic table. So that's pattern 1. Everything is being used. Pattern 2 is how much more we're going to need. And I took these well-respected graphs from the International Energy Agency, and I've shown you there a real major metal like aluminium, and a new kid on the block that we need so much more for the battery, for EVs and energy storage, for example, now on the other side there. And the point I want to make is that all solutions apply here. So on these figures, even by 2050, the amount that's going to be mined by this forecast is about half for aluminium and 70% or so for lithium. So even though we're actually pretty good at recycling aluminium and 70% of all the aluminium ever mined is still in use, we still need to mine, by this forecast, about half of it. So lots of room for improvement, lots of room for other circular economy interventions, but I'm pretty sure in saying we will still be mining material. And lithium, of course, is going from a super low base. It's just not in circulation yet. So that has to ramp up if we want those energy transition technologies. And again, we absolutely need to get much, much better at recycling and other circular economy, but we will still be mining for the foreseeable future. And so after saying that, it's a mixed mode. All interventions apply in a circular economy. I want to just show you a rock, first of all, and that this is where things really start off. And this is looking in a scanning electron microscope. That's 0.1 millimeters on that scale bar. Oops, sorry, I had a timer on there. And that white mineral is the rare earth mineral that they're looking for at Songwe Hill in Malawi. And this is a really important point, that although we always think when we're doing circular economy, how can we be more careful for materials? How can we do better recycling and reuse and so on? There are many people all around the world delighted by this transition who want to mine critical minerals, and really this would make a huge, huge difference to the economy of Malawi if a couple of rare earth mines get going. And it's not only in other places, in Africa and so on, it's right here in the UK. There are 7 commercial projects developing critical minerals in southwest England and a big cluster of companies working all over the world around them. This is the equivalent of putting in a gigafactory in Cornwall if this opportunity works. So there's a huge opportunity in supplying these minerals in the primary supply. And this is what we're up to in our Critical Minerals Challenge Centre, is helping those projects get going, but really trying to put all the other interdisciplinary research around together with the minerals and mining to make sure that this really boosts the economy of the Southwest and is done so with a circular economy lens so that we're efficient and take part in all the parts of the value chain there. So it's a big challenge across the value chain. And so here is my last slide then to come to what we call, when we're thinking from our primary raw materials view and lens, some circular economy fundamentals, which I think might be a bit different to what you often see, is saying that everything, remember, it doesn't matter how many times, you might be able to recycle a few times, but everything started off in the earth. We need to mine more. We often say we need to mine less. We need to mine more, but obviously there are many ways in which we can do it better and more efficiently. And then please, after we've gone to all that trouble, we absolutely need to look after the stuff and keep it in use and in circulation in all the good circular economy stewardship ways. And this starts even in geology world, before you've ever moved anything in the ground, is thinking about much better use of materials and resource efficiency and joining up with new materials design in the future. We can begin that circular economy journey right from the very first steps of materials production. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis. That was fascinating, brilliant, and set the scene perfectly in terms of the challenge that we have in the DICE network, but beyond the DICE network and everything that we do. So we're going to go on to our second speaker now, which is Lydia from Defra and GDSA. And you got here just in time, which is lean attendance, I think. So Lydia, we're very, very pleased to hear from you. Please take notes.
Right, there we go. Hello, so yes, I'm Lydia, I'm from Defra. I'm in the digital sustainability team in Defra, but we also do digital sustainability of government's technology estate. And I also coordinate the GDSA, which is the government's digital sustainability alliance. So more on those two things in a bit, but the reason I'm here today is to give you sort of a whistle-stop tour of practices that we're embedding into Defra's digital estate, how we're taking those lessons across government into the upcoming digital sustainability strategy, which I'm also developing, and then working with our industry partners through the GDSA to utilise all that knowledge and expertise that we don't hold in government as well. So I don't need to probably lecture you guys on what the environmental and social impacts are of our ICT. We know that emissions are increasing and they're rivaling that of aviation and shipping, and the social impacts as well from critical mineral extraction and modern slavery, which exists within our supply chain. But one thing that I'm always keen to make is the economic unsustainability of our technology estate. We vastly over-provision, we underutilise, and those in the room who know our good friend Jerry Hackett, he's always going on about cash is carbon. If you're wasting cash, you're wasting carbon, and if you're wasting carbon, you're probably wasting cash as well. So when I'm having my conversations around government, depending on who I'm talking to, Treasury officials, for example, I'm always keen to make that economic case here that a more sustainable approach isn't just beneficial for the environment, but it's also the economic benefits that we get with that as well. So just to give you a bit of context to the unique position of UK government and the UK public sector. So we've got a huge amount of purchasing power. We're the biggest customer of digital and ICT services in the UK. We spend £26 billion annually. We also have provide a huge number of digital services, which is only growing. And we've got a huge number of people who work in the public sector, 6.19 million people. And in central government alone, that's over 3 million end user devices. So there's huge potential here with the scale and and influence we have, especially within the market. And we also have the benefit of having a lot of centralised procurement standards and frameworks and guidance, which applies to all government procurements. So there's a real big lever for us there to being able to implement that and to embed sustainability in. It soon has a trickle-down effect. And I'll touch on some of those things that we're working on in a moment. But within this, we also have a number of challenges and barriers. And one of the biggest ones is legacy devices. You know, there are job centres out there that have stockrooms just full of old laptops and computers that nobody knows what to do with. Prisons as well. Space in prisons at the minute is very needed, and so trying to utilise that and get tech out that's not necessarily needed, also posing as a security risk, is one of our things that is one of the challenges for us. But also, government's very risk averse. We have a very short-term view. Things are often changing, look what's happening at the moment. We also have a big issue with the standardisation of our metrics and our reporting requirements, and I think that stems from so much of our data coming from suppliers, Scope 3 emissions, as we all know. So we're very, very dependent on supplier data. And it's just difficult to change things in government. I've set out the scale of government, and it's just difficult to get that machinery whirring sometimes. And there is that cultural resistance of, we've always done it like this. Why should we do something new? And you have to convince a lot of people in government to get anything done. Yeah. So what does a more sustainable technology estate in government look like? And to me, this is what it should be looking like. It has to work for people and planet. So it's got to meet end user experience needs. It's got to be resilient. It's got to be secure, it's got to be cost effective, and it's obviously got to reduce environmental and social impacts, or at least avoid them. And, this might look easy enough, but when you look more closely, you find that actually some of those things are going to conflict with one another. A more secure estate is potentially going to impact end user experience if you have piles and piles of security layers. Cost efficiency, again, could impact on resilience if you're cutting corners. So it really is a massive challenge. And then you also realise that you can't just bolt this on. Sustainability can't just be bolted on. It has to be embedded. And therefore, you've got to look at this as a system approach, not just a one-off. So we took the challenge upon ourselves in Defra. We are the Department for the Environment. We are responsible policy owners for sustainability, and we can't just talk the talk anymore. We've got to walk the walk. So this is just to set out some context here in Defra. We've got over 31,000 members of staff, environment agency called Defra. So we've got people who work in offices, but people who are out in the field, scientists in labs, so a really diverse array of users and the services that they're providing. But being the Environment Department, we also have a really high environmental ambition within our staff. I basically work in a department with 30,000 other environmentalists. So we are constantly being challenged and asked by our colleagues to do more. We've got people who work in circular economy, who work in waste and recycling, always telling us, we can do this better. So we challenged our senior leaders and we said, how can we do this in Defra? How can we do this in our digital estate? And to cut a long story short, we ended up taking our upcoming end user device contract, so our laptop phone contract for our staff, and we didn't know what it was going to look like, but we ended up with a contract that provided us with refurbished and remanufactured devices, so devices that had a previous life or devices in Defra that have been repaired, and this is the state-of-the-art technology that we ended up with, so drum roll please.
I'm
No. I'm joking. This is what people think secondhand, remanufactured devices look like. This is what a remanufactured device looks like. It's a device that works, performs, looks exactly like a brand new device. And in Defra, we have the benefit of it being 40% cheaper, saving a load of carbon, a load of raw materials, a load of water, and we were also able to embed some really great social value benefits as well, supporting donation and digital exclusion. and giving people the opportunity to recycle and donate their own devices as well. So it's been a huge success in Defra, and the reason I'm speaking to you today is because of how well it's worked. We are only a few months, well, coming up to a year actually. We started in September, but so far the results have been great. End users are happy. We've put a massive emphasis on performance and making sure that we're extending the life of our devices, and we are using software on our laptops to monitor that. So as soon as it dips below performance criteria, it flags, and the help desk can come in and fix it before you have to, go through the whole debacle of raising a service request. And the benefit this has had in Defra is that it has inspired people, our colleagues, to go out and do it themselves. So it's no longer the job of the sustainability team in Defra to do this. Everyone is doing this. And these are just some of the examples of my colleagues in the digital division in Defra who are doing it themselves, and are being able to reap the benefits. And it's a top-down, it's a bottom and a bottom-up approach as well. We've got Ed Parry, our SRO for digital sustainability, championing this across government as well. And it's also tied in with the publication of Defra's digital sustainability strategy to help hold ourselves accountable. So I've just been told my time is up. So that's the Defra story, but I'm more than happy to get into the government story in the questions and the GDSA as well. Sorry, that's me talking too much because I just get way too into this. But I do have, I'm here afterwards, so do come and ask me any questions, and I can share these slides with you as well. So sorry I didn't get to the good bit, but I got to part of the good bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. And yeah, I know there's a huge amount of work that government's doing, and government gets criticised quite a lot for not doing things. And I've spent the last 2 years on the Circular Economy Task Force, which we might get into as well as the questions, and leading on the electronics side of things. So it was really positive to see Defra engaging and embracing and putting remanufactured into procurement and buying procurement. They've been leading this very quietly. You've been green hushing, I think, for a number of years. And yeah, very exciting. Lots of questions. Right, okay. And so we're now, slight change of speaker, but we've got Laura McDonnell from EPSRC, who's going to talk about transformation pathways. Laura, you're very welcome.
So I have the very distinct pleasure of following up several very inspiring talks by talking to you a little bit about the research funding landscape. So if anyone's feeling deeply inspired, you can now look at ways that you could take your ideas forward. I'm from EPSRC. We're the main funder of fundamental research in the UK, and we are funded by UK government. So we're using taxpayers' money to fund research projects at universities and institutes across the UK. As many of you will know, we've gone through a period of some change in the last 12 months. We're now led by Ian Chapman, and we have a new mission. So our mission focuses on advancing knowledge, improving lives, and driving growth. But what does this mean for people doing research? So there are some changes to the way that we're structured, although very few changes to the way that the research will be looked at, and very few changes to the way that we're funding. So as you can see, we've split what we do into research, strategy and innovations and partnerships, and a little bit around operations, which doesn't affect funding, but it's interesting to know. When we talk about research, we're thinking about all fundamental research in this space in the UK, and very much including the research that's done in this stream around the circular economy, sustainable computing, sustainability, AI, agentic AI, approaches to LLMs, and many, many other aspects that are tangential to the DICE programme. I've had a lovely segue into this already this morning. So our work that we do is really, really heavily aligned to the modern industrial strategy, and there's so much space in here for sustainability and circular economy. So I feel that this should be something that really reassures the room that this is an area that we want to fund in, and this is a space where you're very much already working, thinking about manufacturing, clean energy, creative industries, digital technologies, financial services, professional business services, life sciences, and defence. It's like this with the 10-year vision digital and technology sector. This includes things that we've already heard about this morning with focusing AI, but looking at connectivity and at telecoms aspect, quantum technologies, cybersecurity, engineering, biology, and semiconductors. what does this mean for you? As I said earlier, I followed up some really inspirational talks, and then I did the room thinking, oh yeah, it'd be interesting to do a little bit more work in that space, or to have some time and space to explore. So, in terms of ESRC, these are the things that we offer for our standard grants. So on this side, these awards are you can apply for program grants for large programs for institutions up to £6 million between 4 to 6 years. Standard grants, we look at these every financial quarter. So this is a really, really great opportunity to take quite a big project and to work in this space. New Investigator Awards for first-time applicants, and discipline hopping, which is specific to this ICT and ICT sustainability space, where you can have up to 2 years working with another person to develop skills and to look at emerging areas. On the other side, we've got some of the work that we do around funding students and ensuring the talent pipeline. As part of these slides, I have included some tools. There's no need to photograph these. I believe that they will be shared following this. And if you have any questions, I'm really, really happy to answer them. So we have several calls that are open that are very, very clearly in the space that we're looking at today. And we have our always open standard mode that we talked about already. We also have some opportunities that were shared with us by ESRC colleagues, which may be of interest to those in the room, but perhaps a little bit outside of where you might normally look for funding. We were asked by DICE to share some successes and to think about other projects that are within this landscape space, but maybe you may be less familiar with. So I've included here links to some of our other network classes who also have that CCORM funding element where they're able to fund small grants, projects, summer schools, that kind of thing, that are very, very much in the DICE space, but also have some different aspects. So the top one here, many of you will be aware of, is Sprite, and they're in the digital economy space, thinking about human behaviour, privacy, trust, identity, and making sure that when we're thinking about digital technologies, we're thinking about everybody in that inclusion space. Pro Squared, which looks at prototyping. So it's a network for people with projects where they may be looking for first-time prototyping or support around prototyping, or just looking at what the processes are. Joiner is in the telecom space, and I know that that's an area that specifically DICE is focusing on in the future. eFutures is ICT and sustainable ICT, thinking about materials and new approaches to computing. And then we've got UK Fin, which is looking at financial services, sustainability, privacy, trust, and human behaviour, and Ignite for flexible funding.
This took you.
And that is me.
Question really for the whole panel to begin with. Francis, you gave us some really good insight into the challenges of critical raw materials. Lydia, you gave us some really interesting inputs as to what government can do, and Laurie, telling us all about the opportunities through funding. These are all brilliant, but as has been highlighted, we have got a huge amount of work to do to become more circular. What's on the bottleneck that's preventing us from getting to circularity as quickly as we possibly need to? Maybe let's say that first. And then, Francis, let's go right to left on my side.
Don't know when to start, really.
You've got to
Go. Yes. Right. So firstly, critical raw materials supply chains, all really specialist stuff. They simply don't make themselves. There are points of business failure in each part along, and a very big country out in Asia there that they always realised that raw materials are super important. They've always had good supply chains from mining to that very first stage of processing that people don't make that much money out of, utterly crucial, and then into manufacturing. And they've got so far ahead of everybody else, and they're so powerful that they can watch the world and just leave people in business if they want to, and put the prices down if that suits them as well. So overcoming very powerful partners on sort of that.
So essentially you're saying China. Okay. Who wants to pick up next? Lydia, I think you've got the mic, haven't you? Oh, Laura has. Go on, Laura, you've got the mic.
Awesome. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Good. Right. So in terms of circular economy and the challenges around sustainable business practices, I know that we've done a lot of work in the circular economy team looking at this, and we did in the longest range for a couple of years, and speaking to academics and industry around the specific challenges. Looking at specific challenges around where they're pinch points. And quite a lot of it is around connections and not realising what the opportunities are. So industry not looking to necessarily working with the right people, or academics not necessarily engaging with the right people for research outfits when we have got solutions that are at a very early stage. And there's that need for a sort of joined up connectivity that I know DICE specifically does look to do, and there are other investors that do this too, in making everybody within that supply chain and anybody doing the research aware of what the opportunities are. So certainly there were lots and lots of challenges in this space, especially around and emerging technologies and how you repurpose the old material, the old technology to get something new out of it. And it includes digital sustainability too, things like software.
Thank you. And Lydia, give us 22 seconds on GDSA.
Well, I think using my position as the coordinator of the GDSA, I managed to speak to a lot of people in academia and industry and across government as well. And I think for me, it's a double-edged sword. Basically, industry is saying, well, if government asks for it, we'll do it. And government is saying, well, if industry want to do it, then we'll ask for it. So it's like, who's going to go first? I think things like the upcoming Circular Economy Growth Plan, which I know the task force fed into, will hopefully help to address that and set that direction. And I think, as we've seen in recent events, the business case is just starting to stack up as well, with the resilience side and the supply chain impacts and the cost impacts as well. You know, the demand for EVs has got through the roof. We're seeing that's the most economic choice now. So I think hopefully that two-pronged approach will help make it better.
Which I agree, and using multiple hats that I have. Last year I was president of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management. We wrote a report on lost opportunities, essentially looking at elemental material management and using electronics as one of those major challenges. I personally seen that our understanding of what critical materials has changed significantly just in the last 5 years. People were very much, yes, gold, platinum, silver, and we're now starting to talk, and neodymium. Everybody's wanted neodymium for ages. But we are now talking about tin as a critical raw material, and people still say to me, oh, okay, yeah, I've got tin cans, there you have. So I think that, for me, one of the bottlenecks is people's understanding of the challenge that we have to sustain business as usual with the electronics. People don't really get what our materials are. We use the example of gallium, which is in the screens behind us. 44% of all gallium is still in use, that's ever been mined. So I think for me, one of the major bottlenecks is how we actually bring society with us on this journey of understanding how we respect materials for circularity. And to that point, I think Francis and Lydia, I'd just like to get your thoughts on policy around how we enable that. We've talked about procurement, but what other policy can we use to embed circularity? Lydia, as you've got the mic, we're going to be first.
Yeah. So just based on conversations that I've had with various teams across government, the main focus has been keeping it domestic, keeping it UK-based, and alongside that, you know, we saw the map that you showed, Francis, about the mines in the UK, but we need all the infrastructure to go with that. And again, it goes back to government heavily signalling that they're going to fund it or invest or whatever to help make it happen, or deregulate to help make it happen. But it is also markets and businesses responding to the wider economic piece. And the wider global situation. It can't always be government saying you need to do this, because when we do, then we get pushback and people want to go in this direction.
Government as a facilitator, government as a leader, it has to be better than, I think, a lot of what we can start talking about is urban mining and how we facilitate that. Francis, from your perspective on the policy side, where are the other levers that we can start to play with?
I think the government in a critical minerals strategy, for example, it has some numbers that we're aiming for, but they're not regulatory numbers. And I think what we've been told in our research recently by the recycling companies, so that's the first thing to say, is that the recycling is much better established with companies scaling up than other circular economy interventions. So that's on its way, but they say there'll have to be some regulation. It's no good just having nice ideas and targets.
that you might, or hardly even targets they are. And so they're saying you need the stick as well and the regulation. So maybe we'll have to go for that eventually, or sooner rather than later, I should say, to make us catch things at the end of life. And the big problem in the UK, as I understand, is we're known internationally as being brilliant exporters of all of our waste. And companies abroad are looking to the UK to come and take away our electronics and things to go and recycle them elsewhere. So we've really got to give them the incentives to the low energy prices that will allow people to recycle here in the UK, so we can keep more of our own stuff in circulation for use.
Yeah, and I hope that we're going to change that. I mentioned in my introduction about one of the projects that my organisation, TTP Circular IT, is leading, which is on recovery of critical raw materials using robotics from laptops in particular, end of life. So, Lydia, all of your dead stock that can't be reused, let's have a conversation. But no, in all seriousness, we do have to start realising that we've got all these materials here. And I think the one element that you just talked to, Francis, which we haven't discussed yet, and is European policy, and how European policy can actually influence what happens here, particularly with digital product passports, eco-design standards. Essentially, when I look at the circular economy, we have two elements. We have the legacy, which is everything that we're sitting in that is already here, and then we have the new. And the new is the stuff that we can influence proper circularity for. So, Laura, from your perspective, where does research come into this future scoping of embedding circularity?
Okay, so as I said, the ESRC funds mostly research between tech readiness levels 1 to 4. There are other research councils that fund higher. So I know that there is plenty of work across UK institutions looking at the possibilities around recycling, reuse of technology. Also that there's investments looking at doing this as a scale-up, working with industry. But it's still something that we don't see very much of. I think it's an area where there's an awful lot of opportunity for further research and further collaboration and to make improvements. This is a really missed opportunity in terms of reclaiming materials, and definitely something that is really, really beneficial to the UK in terms of an opportunity for UK institutions to work with industry and influence policy that is emerging.
Francis, if you want to pick that up, I'm just going to ask the audience actually. All of the academics, please put your hands up, I say. Higher. There's more of you here. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up if you see your research as contributing to future commercial.
Quite a few of you. Okay, good. Because France, that's my point. Where does the capitalist point? Where does the research community essentially help? And the commercial activity?
I think there's lots of things that we do, whether it's in inventing a new recycling process or improving it, and then maybe there's a spin-off company. Quite a lot of spin-offs in taking critical raw materials out of waste streams, for example, wastewaters, as well as actual solid materials and components and things. I think in the Innovate UK Climates programme, which chose to concentrate on rare earth elements, it was clever because you had to be doing rare earths or else there was no money. So it's amazing how inventive we are as academics, how many teams thought up why they were doing rare earths and came into the space and went and had a look at where they could recover rare earths from. So design your incentive grants in a clever way, and us academics will come along.
Perfect. Anybody else would like to enter that? Lydia, where does Defra see research in the future scoping?
Yeah, so we've been doing lots of pilots, albeit not solely with academics, but with other organisations like Transform or HETA to pilot technologies and how that can help farmers, for example. With Defra, the Department of Rural Affairs, and so we've been working with HETA to put data servers into water boilers to give, as we know, servers generate lots of heat. So that's giving farmers free hot water or greenhouses free heat to generate food. And we've also been using AI to help farmers utilize the efficiency of their crops, when to plant, what to fertilize with. I don't know if anyone's seen Clarkson's Farm lately, but like some of that stuff we've been piloting in Defra. So it's just having that space to try out things, to see what's going to work, having the contacts that we have in Defra with our farmers and with the other parts of the food industry as well, and they're bringing together both pioneering innovative companies out there and researchers so that we can make sure we're fully utilising this opportunity and we can squeeze out as much of the benefits as we can.
Super. So you've got outbots running around Defra, haven't you? For those of you who watched it. Okay, brilliant. We've got some questions from the floor, from the audience. Lots of them. We're not going to be able to get through all of them. So I'm going to pick one up, which is particularly interesting. So how should we consider ethics and engage local communities in areas that critical minerals are involved in? So picking up points you were making, Francis.
Okay, so engaging local communities, that's standard business for practically every project developing a critical minerals mine now, because there are lessons that if you don't do that well, and then the community turns against you, by the time they've influenced their local politicians, that can be the end of your project. So it's seen as a business risk if you don't do it. You won't get your finance for the project if you don't do it. So I think there's a certain entry level of environmental sustainability and governance criteria that the big investors are looking at, and that's been around for a while. I think the big banks saw that some of the investments they were making, whether it was dams and reservoir projects or big mining projects, they're huge civil engineering undertakings, and if it went wrong, that was a big reputational damage for them. So they brought in international finance corporation standards and things, and so that means that most projects around the world will have some kind of environmental and social impact assessment when they're being done. But that doesn't mean to say that it always works, and we can always do better. So where we are in the research at the moment is in our case study, if you like, in Southwest England. We have our social sciences researchers, and what they've chosen to concentrate on is not just whether the community happens to like the projects or not, the businesses are looking after that, but this promise of good jobs. How does the networking work in the region? How will the local people really get those good jobs, and how will they get on in the companies if they do happen to get in? So we're really looking in the bigger picture as to how the whole region, taking a regional view, not just an individual company view, of how you can really create that good sustainable development for the community. So I think that's where we are on our research.
Brilliant. Thank you, Francis. Now, we have come to end of time. There are lots and lots of questions. So I will encourage everybody who's asked a question to grab a hold of one of the panelists during the coffee break, not physically, and ask a question and have a conversation. Today is all about starting conversations and exploring opportunities. So I'm just going to ask the panel to give literally a 10-second start with Francis, as you've got mine. Your takeaways for the audience from today. What should they be doing to ensure that they are helping to support the transition to a digital and circular economy? Francis.
I suppose I started with the minerals and the mining to begin with, so I'd say don't forget that. Come and ask me about how circular economy applies, because it really does, even at those early stages.
Thank you, Lord.
I think my main takeaway will be to think about things that are a little bit outfield or a bit different. There's loads of scope within this space for making a huge impact, and there's so much opportunity. Even if something is relatively high risk or particularly high reward, but only a small step change, it is always worth it to put ring in.
Thank you, Laura. Lydia.
I think for me, I want to try and summarise in 3 words, which is collaborate, challenge, and share. So the challenge one is particularly important for me because circular economy is a different way of thinking. So you do have to challenge the status quo. and make people realise that how we've been doing it before it's just not good enough anymore. We need to be doing differently. And then sharing the successes, because I think that's how most people will want to get on board. It's when they see how well it's worked for others, they'll want to apply it to their own business or system and model.
Thank you, Tabbron. And from my point of view as chair, I'll say, actually, let us all start to think about how we can become urban miners. We have to mine the urban environment that we already have. So if you'd like to thank the panel in the Norway, and I'll hand back to us.